the thing that we forget.
Mm-hmm.
Folks that struggle with boundaries often have some amount of people-pleasing issue,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because they don't want to make this person mad. But what you forget is when you're doing that, you're not actually punishing the person who's misbehaving. You're punishing all the people who are behaving.
Are you feeling overwhelmed, stuck, or uncertain about how to grow your business without sacrificing what really matters most? Welcome to The Business You Really Want, the show for women ready to build a sustainable, fully aligned business. Aligned with what, you ask? You, your values, your life. Seriously, it is possible. I'm Tonya Kubo, and along with business advisor extraordinaire Gwen Bortner, we're here to show you how. All right, service providers, today's episode is for you. Especially if you find yourself constantly scrambling to accommodate last-minute client requests, finding yourself with projects that are dragging on endlessly while new clients wait. Today, we are tackling what might sound like a counterintuitive thought, which is that the most satisfied clients are not the ones you bend over backwards for. The most satisfied clients are often the ones who work with businesses that have the clearest boundaries. We're going to show you how creating structure doesn't limit possibilities. Right? We're going to show you how creating structure actually expands what's possible for both you and your clients. My name's Tonya Kubo, joined today by the incredible business advisor, Gwen Bortner. Today, we're discussing something that comes up all the time. Comes up all the time with my clients. Honestly, I'm a service provider. It comes up all the time with me in my business. It does not come up for Gwen except through her clients because she has the best boundaries of anybody I have ever encountered. But the struggle is real, right? I hate to use a trope here, but it is just true. The struggle is super real. Now, Gwen, I'm just going to let you take it from here. Why do you think this topic is so critical for service-based business owners especially?
So one of the phrases I used for years is don't reinforce bad behavior.
Say more, say more.
We probably should put that on one of our mugs. Don't reinforce bad behavior. And the thing is, I'll say we've often been trained to do that. And we see it happening a lot out in the world, where my classic example is the child who's misbehaving and the mom says, if you do that again, you're going to get in trouble. And they do something very, very similar and they don't actually get in trouble.
Mm-hmm.
They get another if you do that again.
Right.
So probably, not always the case, but probably what the child is actually wanting is attention.
Mm-hmm.
And so they're reinforcing the bad behavior because when you do the bad behavior, I'm giving you attention.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so, that's an example. In the service provider world, right,
Mm-hmm.
it's one of the things most entrepreneurs are really good at. This is probably a butchering of a Dan Sullivan quote from Strategic Coach, but is most entrepreneurs are really good at heroics, at firefighting, right? And so there's something that, it's the adrenaline hit, it's the dopamine hit, it's all of those chemical hits of, look at me, I just did something amazing for you.
Right.
But the problem, as Dan Sullivan says, is when you're a really good firefighter, at some point you start to become an arsonist.
Mm-hmm.
You start setting the fires, right? In my world, it is we're reinforcing the bad behavior so I can show you how well I fight the fire. Right? And very few of us would want to admit that.
Right.
It's like, oh, I hate it. And it's like, well, then why do you keep doing it? Well, because I have to. Well, no, you don't. There's very little in our world that we have to do. Most of the people listening, possibly everybody listening, is not dealing with real fire, real flood, or blood, which are I call it fire, flood, or blood, right?
Mm-hmm.
Lives are actually not going to get lost if that newsletter doesn't go out on Tuesday like it's supposed to go out. No one is going to die. No one, right?
Right.
But we act like, oh, but we have to have it done by then. No, we actually don't. it may frustrate you. It may mean you have to push your lunch back a day there, but no one's going to die. That is not true. But we like to have that feeling of, oh my gosh, we solved this giant thing, right? But when we get our clients in the habit of allowing them to make us heroes, then we're reinforcing bad behavior.
Right.
And then we're shocked why they don't ever get things done on time. Well, because what they know is that they don't have to get it done on time because you will come through in the clutch with the thing that they need. Until you say, nope, not going to happen for 3 weeks now. And for them to like lose their frickin' mind, they aren't going to believe that you can't get it, that you actually meant the deadline that you meant.
Right.
And so it's all about, once you start establishing those boundaries, so long as you are consistent in holding them and being very, very clear if and when you allow someone to cross them, that this is what this was, and this was this time. That is because of this unique situation, and it's not happening again. They will keep pushing because all of us are fundamentally 7-year-old kids on the playground. There's a great research where when they had no fence, the kids all huddled together. But as soon as they had a fence, once they knew what their boundaries were, they were at all far edges of the playground. And we are all fundamentally 7-year-old kids that are wanting to know, where are our boundaries? Where do we push them? And until we know what they are, we'll keep pushing past them.
Right. The cost of weak boundaries, which, anybody wants to know my boundary issues, we can just go back to the episode where Gwen walked me through a 5-3-1 goal setting session. Very, very briefly, but it's a good enough example. But, what I have experienced in my own business, never-ending projects, right? The project that just never seems to get tied up and offboarded. Scope creep is probably my biggest. And then the one that frustrates me the most, because it is the one that I believe affects my ability to deliver with excellence the worst, is having the stress of multiple urgent deadlines converging. So, for instance, in my business, there is an offer that I have done for several years, and it's a strategic roadmap. That is what it is labeled as. And, I would tell people, I've done it all sorts of different ways. I've done it in a single day session. I've done it over a couple weeks. And then, I started doing one where more of the work was asynchronous versus live and in real time with the client. And I would say, it's 4 to 6 weeks, largely dependent on you getting me the stuff I need in a specific period of time, right? Because we're going to do this, and then you're going to go off and collect these things and get them to me. And then once I get those things, I'm going to do this. And my part is 2 weeks after I get this. Hands down, never is. It's not 2 weeks in one day. It's not 1 week and 3 days. It is always 2 weeks. I got this down to a science. But what happens, right, is it gets to their part and they are off chasing shiny objects, or quite honestly, with my clients, they are dealing with their own fires. And they are putting out fires, and I'm over here going, okay, well, I can't do my part until I get your part. And their answer, because I work with the nicest people you could ever imagine, and this isn't all my clients, but all of my clients are really pretty amazing people, but they would be like, well, that's okay, Tonya. I don't mind. We can't launch it in October. We'll launch it in November. We'll launch in December. But meanwhile, I was counting on the project to launch in October so that I could bring on 2 new clients, right, to serve in the month of October, launch them in November, bring on 2, so on and so forth. And then what happens is if this project isn't actually launching till November, now instead of launching 4 clients in a month, I might be in a position, if this happens with more than one client, I'm expected to launch 6 or 7. And I'm not sleeping, and it's not fun, and I am questioning my life choices. So, Gwen,
I shouldn't laugh, but
you should totally laugh.
So much. It just
right. Exactly. So we're not going to go into the psychology of why I do this. You'll have to listen to the other episode for that. But here's what
I'm gonna say, I'm not laughing at you. I'm laughing with you, but no, I'm actually laughing
No, you're totally laughing at me because this is not a problem you have. But so I want you, Gwen, because we've talked about this privately, both you saying, yeah, but Tonya, as your client, I can tell you this, but also as a service provider to other business owners who struggle with the same issues that I struggle with. I want you to break down for our listeners why clients actually appreciate structure.
So one of the things is it becomes very clear as to what to expect. So they're also not surprised on the other end,
Mm-hmm.
right? It allows conversations to be less emotional and more matter of fact. It doesn't become about them, it becomes about the thing,
Mm-hmm.
right? And what most people are wanting is they actually are wanting the result,
Mm-hmm.
whatever the result is. And it allows you to be able to consistently give them the result and or update them very realistically about what the result now is going to
Mm-hmm.
be based on, whatever happens, right? Because, sometimes things happen. Like, it's not because, all clients are bad and evil and they're trying to do this on purpose. I
Right.
absolutely, do not believe that. And everyone on the planet is most worried about this person, ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
That's it, right? So everything in our mind doesn't say, well, I want to make sure that Tonya can really deliver what I've asked her to,
Right.
right? We think about, I need this now. And so until we get in the habit of how do I make sure that Tanya's actually delivering the highest quality work that I want her to deliver, well, that's by allowing Tonya to be able to set boundaries and guidelines and do all of those things. Because fundamentally, that's what I really want, but I don't think of it.
Right.
Right. But when you, as my service provider, set that up for me, then I actually stop having to worry about, is it actually going to be the best quality? Is it going to be delivered in the way I want? Is it going to be delivered by deadline? Is it going to be all of the fill in the blank things? And so that actually takes out a piece of my cognitive load.
Okay.
When I know exactly what to expect and how to expect it.
All right. So we're reducing decision fatigue.
It's not even decision fatigue. It really is cognitive load of like, I'm just worried about it.
Right.
Right. It's not even necessarily like I'm making a decision, but it's sitting back here taking cycles because it's like, is she going to get it done? Once we know, then it's like, no, she's absolutely going to get it done. I don't, I don't have to worry about that. The classic example that's a physical example is when I used to teach knitting. One of my big things is I'm always on time. I always start on time. I'm always in the classroom, at least 10 minutes, if not 15, 20 minutes early, so that I can start on time. One time I had gotten the wrong time in my head because the two gals that I was rooming with were doing a class and their class started a half an hour later. There was usually all the classes kind of start at the same time. And this one had this weird schedule. And so I had in my mind that it started a half an hour later than it did. And the organizers had worked with me enough, like they were panicked when someone said Gwen's not here. Because that was like, Gwen must be dead.
That's what I would think.
I mean, and they like called and like, are you okay? And it was like, yeah. And it's like, well, your class was started at, I'll say 9 and it was like, 9:10. It was like, holy crap. I thought it started, I got in my mind, it was 9:30. And because I thought it was 9:30, I was like, I will be there in like 3 minutes as fast as I can get there. I was mostly ready. Big apologies, all
right.
But because my boundaries of how I behaved was so consistent, they didn't like, oh yeah, no, she'll be there. She's always late.
Right.
They were actually worried. Right. And I had enough consistent students that the students knew if Gwen's not here when it starts, something is going on.
Right.
So they also went to go find a person to tell them right away, like, Gwen's not here, not like, Gwen's not here again. It was just like, Gwen's not here.
Yeah. Check her hotel room. Look for a pulse.
Hotel room. Make sure she's not dead. or, injured or sick or,
Mm-hmm.
right? But that's the power of the boundaries, right?
Mm-hmm.
It is everyone knew exactly what to expect,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? Which makes it more comfortable for everybody. So it
Mm-hmm.
also wasn't weird for any of the people who wanted to like really react strongly because they knew exactly what to expect.
Yeah. So, in all my great years of practicing boundaries, otherwise known as every day, just trying to get a little bit better than the day before, and still so far to go. I think I see four essential components to effective boundaries. Because I think part of the problem that people like me run into is we look at boundaries as a monolith. It's this one unified thing. You set a boundary and then you, I don't know, go off and have tea or something. But the boundaries have components, right? So the first, I think, is having very clear prerequisites, having necessary elements that are required before the work begins. So as a service provider, that may be as simple as you have to pay the invoice before I start work with you, right? It may be you have to sign the agreement before I send the invoice because I'm not taking your money until you have already agreed to our terms. Then I'll send the invoice. And then once you pay the invoice, work gets started, right? So having those clear prerequisites, I think a structured timeline, and I fight this left and right. I'm still fighting this, just so everybody listening knows, right? I have my own hills to climb, folks. But the structured timeline where you're creating realistic deadlines with client input. And I think that's key because I think we hesitate for a structured deadline because we're like, well, we don't know where this is going to go. Okay, fine. Maybe it's not, and I think maybe it's just, this is Tonya's problem here. But I don't know, because there's cases where I'm like, well, they tell me they have all of this, but until I see it in my hand, I don't actually know really what we're doing. But what I'm personally recognizing is I still have been doing this long enough to set a realistic timeline, deadline, and then have the client collaborate with me on what makes sense based on what's going on in their life, what's going on in mine. To your earlier point, defined consequences. And I think that's the biggest, right? Having options that are explicitly stated for what happens when deadlines aren't met. And then finally, the backup system. Like, what are your alternate pathways to keep projects moving? I think so far, all we've really talked about, Gwen, is it's like, okay, so, me saying, okay, I can't do my part until you get me this. So now I'm in a holding pattern, which quite honestly is a position of powerlessness. Like, I can't help it. I'm a victim, da, 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 da. When in reality, if I went into the agreement saying, okay, and if you don't get me this on time, we've got option 1 and option 2. Option 1 is I move ahead without you. Option 2 is you appoint somebody else who can get me this stuff within 5 days.
Option 3 is you go to the end of the line and, oh, by the way, that's 9 months from now.
Okay, say more. Because that's just like I almost have to go to the bathroom now. That makes me so nervous. So say more.
So if your services are, and this isn't true for everybody, and I'm not making it as a critical judgment, but if your services are truly in demand, right? And I'm going to use the example you used at the beginning of your strategic roadmap, right? You are actually saying, I'm expecting this to be done within 6 weeks. So you can just say 6 weeks, which means I know I can start another one on this date. And I know that many times you then had the next one signed up for that date, so on and so forth, right? Right down the line, right? So the problem is, if they don't do it by this date, right, 4 weeks out, so that you have your 2-week deliverable time frame. If it's 5 more days, you've now pushed 5 days into this next one, right? Where the answer for me, because I'm really good at boundaries, would be, if you don't hit this date, I will let you know when the next available slot is. And currently, I'm scheduling, like, we're filming this in March.
Right.
You could say, and currently I'm scheduling for July. Now that may freak them out, but it's like, when we contracted, you knew you had 4 weeks to get me this information. And I understand like everything in your life went to hell in a handbasket, but your crisis isn't necessarily my crisis. Back to this is not life and death. Most of us are not actually dealing with life and death.
Yeah.
And if you needed someone else to do it, you should have thought of that 5 days prior.
Mm-hmm.
And that's your responsibility to figure out who else is going to do it. And or I proceed without you. Right. I mean, like the I proceed without you is fine. Assuming you actually can. Can't always do that, but assuming you is fine. But say you get two choices. Either I proceed without you, or we're going to reschedule you to the next available slot, which currently is such and such.
Whenever.
Now, by the time 4 weeks have passed, the next available slot may be September. Because if you're really selling these like hotcakes,
right,
by the time those 4 weeks have passed, that could be September. So you don't say the date, you say the next available slot, which currently is. Right. And so when they get there, it's like, okay, so you have two options. I proceed without you, or we go to the next available slot. The next available slot is X. I can't do that. Well, I also can't deliver the quality product that I want to deliver in the way that I want to deliver. And I am not going to punish all of my other clients who are actually getting me stuff on time by doing a half-assed job for them because your deadline has run into their deadline.
Is that a direct quote? Like, am I supposed to follow that script, Gwen?
Yes. Because here's the thing that we forget. Folks that struggle with boundaries often have some amount of people-pleasing issue. Right, because they don't want to make this person mad. What you forget is when you're doing that, you're not actually punishing the person who's misbehaving. You're punishing all the people who are behaving. You're saying, okay, well, these other, like you said, you take on 4 at a time. These other 4 people who I wanted to give ample time to, what I'm doing instead is I'm going to gyp you out of some of your time, some of my brain cells, some of my energy, because this person screwed up, but you're going to get the slightly less work. Now, when you say it that way, all of a sudden it's like, oh, well, I don't want to do that.
I don't like that. I don't like the person that you're talking about right now.
Right? But that really is what you're doing. And if we go the extreme, the 4 this month all pushed, the 4 the next month, not, all were getting their deadlines. They're only getting half of your time, experience, knowledge, brain. Even though they paid for the full and they did what they were supposed to do. Why are they the ones getting punished?
Okay, so I was going to ask this question later, but I'm going to ask it right now.
Okay.
But the customer's always right, Gwen.
Oh, screw that. That is not true. That is one of those biggest lies on the planet.
Fair, right? But people still say it. Right? Like, I still hear that from, like, especially from potential clients. Of course, I now have a better filter for red flag clients.
I was going to say, the first thing is someone who's saying, I'm being a totally irrational and I'm right because of it is not a good client. It doesn't matter that they don't like you. And it also doesn't matter that they bad talk you to everybody because everybody actually knows they're a bad client. And when someone hears that you told them, nope, I'm not doing it, they'll be like, oh, Tonya's amazing. They won't be like, oh, Tonya's horrible. They'll be like, oh, wow, she actually stood up to that horrible person.
But the reason I asked the question, I mean, it is, I knew you were going to have a strong reaction. I didn't know you were going to have that strong of a reaction. But part of why I asked the question is because, what you said is, people who have a little bit of people pleasing in them. And I think a lot of people would say, that's not true. I am not a people pleaser. I do not have that in me. But what they will say is they'll have some kind of service-based business background, maybe retail or whatever. And they will say, but the customer's always right. I have to let the customer always be right. They'll view it not as people pleasing, but as great customer service. And that's what I really want you to speak to.
Great customer service is only appropriate for great customers.
Just give me a moment there.
I love it when I give you a mic drop moment in the middle.
Okay, keep going.
Because that's the thing. Great customer service for someone that you are never going to make happy because the
Mm-hmm.
customer's always right, isn't great customer service because they don't see it as great customer service. They just see that you're not doing, you are not filling my every whim. And when you fill their every whim, there are now 100 more whims,
Mm-hmm.
which means you're never actually getting them what they want. You actually can't provide great customer service to someone who is not a really good fit customer for you.
Right.
It's just impossible.
Okay. I like to leave our episodes on a little bit of an upbeat note. So, what are some tips? I think you've given us some already, but maybe it's more a matter of providing a summary of how do you frame boundaries positively as a benefit to the client?
So part of it is what we talked about just a little bit ago, which is by holding these boundaries,
Mm-hmm.
whatever they are, however you define them, you can say, I'm able to give you my very best.
Mm-hmm.
And not only do I want to do that for you, but I want to be known for doing that for all of my customers.
Mm-hmm.
And where I know you wouldn't want me to not give my very best to someone else, I also know you wouldn't want someone else taking from me so I couldn't give my very best to you.
Mm.
Right? So this is kind of the fairness play.
Mm-hmm.
We're gonna treat everybody and everything the same so that it's as fair as it can reasonably be. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
things are never equal, but reasonably equal, that everyone's getting the same type of fairness, attention,
Mm-hmm.
Brain power, all of those things. Because most people want to be fair.
Right. That is,
Right?
or perceived as fair at the very least.
Or perceived as fair.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So it allows for that to be part of their motivator. Also, by setting it up ahead of time and making it clear not just what I need you to do, but if you can't, here are your options. Because, one of the things sometimes is, 1 week, keep using your example, 1 weekend to your 4-week, time frame to get me stuff, right? Things are going crazy. Reach out to me then, and I can let you know what I can do.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Maybe I can't get it done, within the next week, but possibly I've really only sold 3 of my 4 spots, and I can put you in this other spot right now, which means you're only going to be running a few weeks late as opposed to a lot of weeks late.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Or as an alternative, someone who's in I'm going to call it month, right? Next month's spot actually would love to get moved up a spot. I can swap you to.
Mm-hmm.
But I can only do that if I know early enough.
Right.
Right? So part of this is saying I need to be communicated as soon as I know. But if you're waiting till, 1 hour before the deadline, I got nothing for you.
Yeah.
Right? There's only so much I can do. So being really clear about why this works and that there are alternatives, the sooner I know it. But it's back to, I'm not being responsible for your behavior.
Mm-hmm.
Right? You get to be responsible for your behavior. This is how you can help me help you. Right?
Right.
Being really clear about that from the get-go. I think that's the other thing, is that we don't want to talk about the what if situations because we're afraid we're encouraging them to do it. But it's usually actually the opposite, to say,
Right.
I've already thought about this. We have alternatives, but you can't be waiting to the last minute. This is, too bad at that point.
Right. And, using an example from our own business, we actually encountered this on the client side a year ago when we were rebranding. Now, we entered that thinking we were refreshing the brand. We were just making a little updates. We were just going to zhuzh it up a bit. And lined up, several providers to help us. One person who was going to help us just with a few visual elements and some new updated templates. One person who was going to help us with some copywriting. And then one person who was just going to help us, in our minds, swap out the copy on a few web pages and maybe even redesign it. And lined everything up, got our timeline going, right? This is going to happen in May and this is going to happen in June and July, and we're going to be all set and ready to go by August. And what happened is when we were working with that first service provider, we were like, oh, actually it was you because it's your brand. But, oh, I don't like this as much as I thought. And now that we're digging into this and I'm seeing how we're going to expand this out, I don't want to expand this. And so it went from a little, just a little cosmetic touch up to like a full blown Brazilian butt lift, complete mommy makeover, head to toe cosmetic surgery. And we had, and what I needed to do is I reached out to every service provider in the line and said, okay, this just got a lot bigger than anybody anticipated. And you said you had this timeline. And so now my question for you is I'm thinking we're probably going to be about 6 weeks delayed because we have to push pause on provider 1, start working with provider 2, blah, 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 blah. And every single person was more than happy to say, oh, you know what? These things do happen. And one person was like, okay, well then instead of May, we can do August. Somebody else said, I've got a lot of flexibility in July, gets really tight come August 1st. And when we got to that person's turn, I went to you and I was like, okay, but it's August. And your exact words were, yeah, but she already told us that she didn't have space in August. So tell her we're ready and ask her when the soonest she can fit us in is. And
I like to believe I'm a good customer.
Well, 1, you're a good customer. 2, I remember in that moment thinking, not that I actively expected a different reaction from you or a different response, but I was prepared for one that was different. I was prepared for frustration. I was prepared for, well, but we really wanted this. And you were just so matter of fact of like, no, she told us when she was available and when she had crunch time. We didn't get her this stuff in time to take advantage of this window. So, back to it's not fire, it's not flood, it's not blood, Tonya. Just ask her when she can get it done. And I don't think we were not frustrated with any service provider in that whole experience. And I never got the indication. Maybe they talk about us behind our back, but I don't think they do. They were never frustrated with us because everything was clearly communicated on the front end, in the middle, and on the back end. Okay, Gwen, very quickly, here's what I need you to tell me. Okay. I'm listening. Maybe I have some difficult boundaries, or maybe I have some clients that I'm in these existing relationships with, and I'm recognizing I have a boundary issue. Give me a couple of ideas on how I can introduce boundaries to existing clients without damaging the relationship.
So I'd love to say I can absolutely answer that, but I can't because for some clients, adding boundaries will, I'll say, damage the relationship. But most of those clients would be the clients that when their name pops up on their phone, when you have to get on a meeting with them, there's a little thing in your head. It's like, as opposed to, woohoo, right? So no, there will probably be some damaged relationships, but they usually aren't with the clients that you want to keep. Almost always. There can be exceptions. I'm not going to say it's never going to happen. So I'd love to say I can guarantee that. Absolutely, I'm not going to pretend like I can guarantee that. However, for the bulk of the clients, if you can say, we are setting this new boundary, whatever it is, and here is why it benefits you. Okay. I was just at an event with Chris Voss, and he calls it the when you I feel because, and it's a version of that. Okay.
Yeah.
Of actually saying, if we stop this behavior, it benefits you because of this reason that benefits you. It can't be all about, Tonya. It can't be all about
right.
Gwen, right? But using the example I used earlier is a perfect example. When I hold you to that deadline, it makes sure, and I hold everybody to the deadline, it makes sure that you're getting exactly my full attention that you're paying for. Right? And so sometimes that takes a little bit of thought. because our first response, because like I said, all of us as humans, our first thought is about us. So it takes a little bit of thought to say, how does this actually benefit them? And sometimes that's something you need to brainstorm. You need to work with someone on to say, well, why does that? Because it feels, boundaries initially feel very selfish. They feel like they're only serving me, which is true. They are serving you, but they're usually serving you so that you can serve others better. And once you start putting that piece out there, the good customers will say, oh, I totally get that. I totally understand that. And my other thing is, if you're feeling very anxious about it, start with just one aspect. Don't try to put in this giant list of boundaries. Okay, because what'll happen is you'll start slipping on a lot of them. And my biggest piece of advice with boundaries is consistency, especially at the beginning, makes all the difference. It's real, and it takes a lot of energy to be consistent at the beginning when you haven't held them. So it's going to take you a ton of energy. Be aware of that. So having 10 new boundaries is kind of like ridiculous. One new boundary you can do, be super consistent with it, super consistent with it. And once it becomes habit, and it's habit for the rest of the people that you're holding the boundary for, they'll stop pushing against it so hard. Someone will every once in a while, but it becomes much easier. Then we do the next one. Then we do the next one. Now, for some people who actually kind of instinctively can do it, it's like it's easier to do it all at once to say, here, kind of a new sheriff's in town and it's the boundary sheriff. Both can work. But for most of the people I work with, putting one in place at a time is the easier way. And the clients that are really good, once you get past the first couple, they're like, oh yeah, no, you can just give me the rest of it because I'm seeing the benefit of it.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, so good. So good. I'm going to have to listen to this one. I don't want to listen to it, honestly, but I'm going to have to listen to it. All right. So
more than once?
Probably on repeat. No lie. Sometimes the doctor needs the medicine worse than anybody else. All right, listeners. So while it may seem counterintuitive, you heard it from Gwen, the customer is not always right. Creating clear boundaries with clients creates a structure where both parties can thrive. You thrive, they thrive. When expectations are clear and processes are defined, your projects will stay on track, your stress decreases, and the relationship becomes more valuable for everyone involved because their stress decreases when the projects stay on track as well. If you're ready to implement better boundaries in your business but aren't sure where to start, I would love to say we can help, but really, we cannot. Gwen can help. I know my limits, folks. I stay in my lane. And you can get all sorts of information on how Gwen can help at everydayeffectiveness.com. But if you want to dip your toe in the water in terms of what working with Gwen looks like and what those boundaries can look like for you, we have Insight to Impact, which is our premium weekly accountability subscription that helps you gain clarity on your business one reflection at a time. And every Friday, you'll receive a thought-provoking question to help you examine your business. And when you respond, you'll get personal feedback, especially if it involves boundaries, directly from Gwen. It will not come from me. Head to everydayeffectiveness.com/impact to learn more. Thanks for tuning in to The Business You Really Want with Gwen Bortner. I'm Tonya Kubo, reminding you that sustainable success is within reach. Make sure to subscribe to the show and visit thebusinessyoureallyWant.com for more resources. Until next time, keep dreaming big and acting with intention.